Hi, my name is Mike Fahl. I'm a visual artist. I am a philosopher. I am an investor. I'm a POTUS candidate, POTUS, President of the United States candidates. You all will need this sort of autism to correct your current government system if you think that there should be any remnant of a constitutional republic or a historically rooted in founding father documents attempt of maintenance. So, um, as a presidential candidate at mutantmanagement.com, will have what it is I'll be reading this evening in terms of policy. Ladies and gentlemen, there's only so much time. There's only so much time to correct the tumorous overlays that are occurring around us with regards to uh, technology and the uh, ingress of surveillance and the gathering of our data, both uh, complicit via terms of service and public via terms of stores, gas stations, intersections recording us. That being said, Mike Fail, mutantmanagement.com will have some policy. It'll also have a triage center there, and anyone cued into other aspects of um, of what mutant management does. Well, that will certainly come with its own instruction. So I'm a business entity. My number is 1134-7951-0160. My entity is Campaign to Elect Mike Fab, LLC. Um, Signed. I've paid for this. Principal information is there. You can go to the fec.gov website. You can type in Michael Travis Fail. That will give you some results. Now, my political thoughts, I'm going to read this paper and in order to outline a basic theory of how it is we might retool or tool down or reapproach the divisions in the bureaucracy and the events that are keeping us at uh, bay away from progress. Global, the Navy destroyers and new ships, which allow policing and trade routes, but trade routes for the U.S. and its various trading partners. Global middle class nations will fall into non-civil countries. China will not be able to support their older population and continue at the way that it is. Um, Sorry, that's a disjuncted side note. We need to fund farmers. We need to remove green restrictions such that food supply is open. By green, I just mean access to vegetables, access to the farm's produce that it is producing. Now, if a major corporation or a major individual buys up too much farmland and is not using it as farmland, uh, the zoning whereby the zoning is already farmland, they won't be able to petition the government to change that zoning. If they attempt a zoning re definition. The federal government can just take away that via eminent domain, whatever it is they're attempting to do, and force that land to be non-GMO organic farmlands. It's important that we make a quick distinction between the GMO genetically modified foods and the organic foods, such that currently, 2022, my understanding is that in Europe, you do not have an allowance for GMO, genetically modified seeds and or produce to be planted in the majority of Europe. Monsanto, bought out by Bayer, is always on the move to advance this with the discovery of the Cas9 bacteria and CRISPR technology, 2005 roughly, advanced in 2015. We can expect GMO seeds. We can expect viruses, the creation of viruses. We can expect the creation of chimeric animals and kind of a genetic restriction process that may go into effect. Very Gattaca-like. In terms of humans attempting to remove what we currently understand as genetic diseases and implement or access or give expression to genetics which amplify or are considered superior performing aspects of the human organism's expression. As far as I understand, there's already been a couple Chinese girls, infants that are born that have been genetically orchestrated via the CRISPR technology. Open energy access while promoting green energies, as well as thorium nuclear power based upon resources and demography. Domestic power, such as in the West, we need lots and lots of solar panels. In the Midwest, we need where there's lots of wind and flatlands that could benefit from green technology as windmills. In the Midwest, you could put up nuclear power, thorium nuclear power. There's benefits to that. I'm not stuck on that. It's been argued the benefits of thorium over uranium. There's on the coastlines, we could use some power that stems from the sea. We could use some geothermic power, and who knows, right? We just continue to open the technologies up in that regard. Let's continue. Russia, now this is current of August 2022. Russia is currently invading Ukraine. For those things in the future, there are not necessarily tariffs going on, but supply chain issues between China and the US and the globe. There's greater news transparency that seems to be being covered through what were otherwise regulated channels of Google's YouTube, which is giving insight of different nations, coverage of different countries, news sources, such that a year after the U.S. troop removal and occupation of Afghanistan. We currently have the Taliban bringing more fundamental Islamic extremist behaviors to the country, such as a non-equality for women, no secondary education, no ability to work. Half of the workforce is essentially gone. They're already decimated. We're post-COVID. That being said, currently Russia is the fourth largest fertilizer export, and it exports 5 to 8% of potash fertilizer. And this has to do with palladium, lithium, nickel, and so Russia is rich in certain resources. Georgia 2014 Ukrainian takeover. It's argued, I was in Ukraine in 2018, and this apparently, according to this particular idea, is that the U.S. had put in Zelensky via a coup in 2014 and changed the landscape of Ukraine, the political, legal landscape. God, what to say? Under political thoughts. Right. Okay, so get a load of this. The main thrust of this campaign isn't just like Trump's build a wall or we are change. It's better than whatever. But look, Article 5 in our Constitution allows a convention of states. So the game plan is to utilize and activate this particular article that allows 34 states and their legislators to put forth amendments that 38 states out of the 50 currently could ratify to change the amendment process that thwarts the current notion that the Congress gets to amend the Constitution. It's another route in which the people are able to, if Congress is corrupted or stalled as it is, it's another means in which the people can change and amend the Constitution. And so there are a few things that could be amended by this. Currently, the people that are heading this are right-wing Republican groups. It doesn't have to be like this. This could be for any particular amendment where you could get the legislators of 33 states to present 34 states to present such a thing. And but currently, these legislators are attempting, after the Trump Mar-a-Lago raid, they're attempting to outrightly have the people call Congress people and demand that they speak up on dismantling or removing the FBI. Some of the intelligence agencies also can be corrupt as bureaucratic divisions that are extensions of the government. My notion isn't to only use and encourage a wide-scale involvement and a streamlining of the process of Article 5. It would be an attempt to remove lobbying powers away from oil, pharmaceutical, big tech, big corporation, and as well as, if I didn't mention, the military industrial complex, those main sectors, as well as any other individuals attempting to lobby, hence legalize bribery for votes to change the legal structure is not proper representation. I would also attempt to put forward the idea that Congress vote on an amendment which only grants their pay to be that which is equivalent to the mean average of their constituency. So both senators of each great state would have the same amount, but each person in the House would be have their income mimic that. Now, that is just as a general notion, right? That you're representing not only a population within this current financial system that is spending outrageously, so that you are behest of the financial interests of your constituency at what I would say the average implies. That may or may not include the homeless constituency, instead of just the currently housed constituency, which housing for homeless is an entirely different topic to cover here shortly, though, if I get back around to it. Okay, so anyway, first things first, you limit the pay, you remove lobbying, you remove anything that is an attempt to bribe or alter the voting of anyone that is a representative in either the House or the Senate. We make that what we call illegal. And we make a move on that. Then we, instead of having politicians that are there for policy who are bought out, we call people the representative statespeople, the people of the state, either to the local municipalities or groups that they represent, or the state itself as senators. And kind of like in the great state of Oregon, apparently their government seems to not so much give any pay to anyone that is a politician. Politicians should be there for the virtue of the people, for the virtue of representing the will of the people in both the best reasons to do or choose something of that population, and or just the weight of the will of that population's majority. That being said, my hands are pretty big. President Pussy Powers getting raided. Everyone hates Biden. If I can become at all as popular as Andrew Yang, that would be fabulous, right? So what we do is we use Article 5 to encourage the states and the people to rally, to get amendments to the floor so that we can actually change this locked process of amendments. Back in the day, when the country was put together just several generations ago, the idea of amendments were like that every generation was going to put through a new amendment. Well, this isn't the case. In the body politic, if amendments and articles are the spine of the body politic, then all of the laws, legal structures, and bills are musculature, branches, arms of this now very tumorous body that has been essentially bought and sold. Now, of and for and by the people doesn't mean that a silver spoon like Trump, who wants to, instead of be a war president, he instead wants to feed the military, engineers, and producers of weapons by selling weaponry to Saudi Arabia, such that we don't have to do what Biden's done, which is continue a war such that the global currently elite people of international and not just American interests are being funded a tremendous amount. So okay, here's another idea, right? All executive orders, whoever writes that executive order or whoever drafted that executive order, kind of like the Declaration of Independence, it needs to have their signature on it with maybe a secondary memorandum of what their intent was behind putting a executive order typed in the fashion that it was in front of the president to sign. So we want disclosure of who's actually typing this up and what are their what's the virtue behind them typing this executive order up, and let's have their signatures and those secondary dog-eared pages attached to every executive order, right? Because certainly people are signing shit. These presidents are signing shit, and they didn't type that stuff up. Whether they're numbskulls, too numbskully to do it themselves, or somebody else is obviously putting it together, trying to get a refinement, whether it's based on the will of the president or whether or not some background group or lobbying center or X, Y, and Z is blackmailing a president. Now, look, here's another thing. I mean, a lot of people could say, "Hey, you could pop off Biden, you could pop off Hunter if there was a background elite." He's not working with much, right? He's a good assassination president, right? So I think Biden's going to go for the "I'm out of my mind" approach and then step down, right? Because whoever might be behind choking his balls and running the show in the way that they're running, like I think a lot of presidents have, not discounting President Trump too. You don't think he went on the behest of the pharmaceutical industry, on the behest of the military industrial complex? Don't you think that he was about big money and big business being moved, right? And I'm not saying that the big business moves weren't beneficial for big business in the United States, but we are here for, by, and of the people. Now, that could bring us to immigration. Feel free to keep putting up a wall, right? I don't mind it. I just know that a proper use of keeping people out goes hand in hand with depleting or diminishing our global expansionistic empire of other countries' interests and the exploitation of their population and their resources. Not all countries need to be a liberal, democratically installed American interest government. They don't. It's not necessarily in their best interest. I say this, Venezuela, for example. My belief is we're attempting still to get who we want in government control. And I'm not saying the guy that's in control doesn't have his problems. I'm just saying that before America attempted to get a hold of those oil resources and control those to give to the Koch brothers refineries in the bottom of the in the Gulf on the U.S. side, that does heavy crude and run that Tarzan line out of Texas for the same reason, because it's heavy crude instead of the light crude that U.S. produces, right? That our goal is simply to topple and take over both Iraq and Venezuela and any other country where we can get business in there to suck them dry and then dislocate and displace the population's true benefit to living on a land with such resources. I don't believe Israel's to be supplemented as a client state of the U.S. any longer. I don't think even running for president, there should be any sort of symbolic fly to Israel and put on a yarmulke and get a photo op next to the Wailing Wall. That's as almost despicable as AOC's fake, border wall thing, or her fake handcuff arrest, or whatever this burlesque pageantry is that other political critics have mentioned, that it seems like that's all we have in this bought and sold lockstep right Republican left Democratic Party. Now, my party is what I call the cherry picker party. You can use any help and any ability to bring this up, then this is that I will pull from any different ideologies: independent, libertarian, conservative, liberal, classical liberal, any party. Can be, we're here for preservation of something like a rudimentary form in a minarchist state with progress, right? But not progress that works to work around the rights that the human American citizen already has, such that, like the Fourth Amendment, requires that you have a warrant for search and seizure. Now, currently, we allow, I believe, the last loop was, well, the U.S. doesn't spy on its citizens. We allow the U.K. to do that, and we spy on theirs, and then we just trade the data, right? So it's not us directly spying, and that's their little government loophole to continue this over encroachment of surveillance cameras at intersections, on many businesses being encouraged, and as well as on your phones. Right now, there should be, in my opinion, an executive order that will outlaw any corporation that's making digital phones that does not put eyelids on or supply anti-Wi-Fi, anti-audio bags anymore, such that we're not going to go out of our way to make certain that we are a citizenry of with no layer of anonymity. This is an attempt to condition the population that's already fairly conditioned to get used to the idea that any store that you can go into via the terms of service of merely walking into their store, that they can check your phone's Wi-Fi, figure out who you are, relate your credit card or your payment history, exactly what you're buying, to your facial recognition, and all of the camera stores, and pump all this to some grand AI, right? And it almost becomes what I would think an absurdity. The Yarkowski effect, or the idea that AI, or if you will, that whatever it is we're producing, from radio waves going out, once the planet was emitting that, to now the internet, high frequency, very specific, almost infinite chip frequencies that we can bring down and exact individual phones globally. That there's a mirror to this that allows, if you will, alien civilizations to monitor our doings. And so, just to break the ice on this, there in my administration will be an attempt not to hide, but to fully disclose either the not knowing or the amount that we do know about any other extraterrestrial, uh, off world civilizations that are monitoring us, eclipse us almost like a god or a demigod, or function from our point of view as a god. Um, you know, the disclosure project is important. And then the idea of just hitting major bullet points in policy, like Roe v. Wade, for example. Well, I don't believe that a separate genetic code on such a non-differentiated level, where you would say there's really no heartbeat, there's really no nervous system, there's a clump of cells that's not particularly differentiating into any being right now, that I would say that does not qualify as something any more than, although categorically different from sperm, or me scratching flakes of skin off of my wrist. Now, it's not an ignorance that I don't know that that's not, where human babies come from. It's the idea of rights or civil autonomy for individual women. Now, currently, we're not legislating life. We have what we call personhood. Personhood legally on the federal statute is already defined as that which can exist outside of the mom's womb. So that is somewhere between 5.5, 6 months in human gestation. That is where the human organism is granted personhood, where the law extends personhood currently to corporations. So corporations would lose personhood, money would cease to be speech, so that we could not have these large transfers of speech as influence. Banks would no longer be backed by the government. The Convention of States group would like a balanced budget amendment. I believe under the current spending that into the mega trillions, it's irrecoverable relative to America's gross domestic product. My belief is that the Fed should become liable to global debt. We dislocate the current dollar. We map every current dollar. We get a finite amount of USD. We lock it to a finite blockchain. We dismiss the current USD. We supplant it then with another cash, meta USD that goes, once again, the purse goes back into Congress. We get rid of, like Ron Paul said, the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is part of international banking, domestic banking. The U.S. is the biggest hegemonic power, once held, but not only by military, but by the U.S. petrodollar, which just recently has been dislocated, and because Russia and Saudi Arabia are trading with rubles, and China with yen. So we don't have the market peg anymore on the petrodollar, which was one of the U.S.'s great hegemonic power positions, power roots. And so that is gone, right? And so because of that, our debt and our spending, although can have a huge confluence with other currencies and increase inflation that might benefit us locally, domestically, relative to the rest of the world, we are devastating. The U.S. inflation is, and printing is devastating the globe still. We're doing that. The increase of the dollar is doing that. So we dislocate the dollar, we make a finite amount, we don't increase that amount, or if we do, it is a pre-programmed percentage based on maybe population growth. We could peg the dollar to copper or some other, perhaps nickel, some other metal to peg it to. Beyond that, we just have a finite amount that is mapped, but not mapped to the bill. Maybe you could have different digital blocks that are mapped to every 100,000 or 200,000, like $20 bills in circulation or something like that, right? Such that people, once again, are not, and their money is not being gifted over as silicone data that gets to feed the grand AI. Let the AI, it's got enough data for the time being. Choke it a little bit, right? Like putting on the masks allowed the AI to attempt to reduce its analysis and its statistical correctness relative to the analysis of all the populations walking in the stores with just their eyes, hats, hair, other things, right? It made it smarter. And so not only do we have biological manipulation on the most fundamental DNA level, and we have bad actors that, if true, are facilitating poisons, if you will, both in the food and in our biosphere, such that if they themselves are attempting to come to the rescue with that which they created, create the monster, and then cheer around the next creation for the solution, and that those that are before us at the behest of our attention are manipulating us. They should be brought to a type of transparency. It should be brought out in front of us. Once again, I'm a political candidate. My name is Mike Fahl, Mikefahl. You can search me under Michael T. Fahl on the FEC.gov. I am a legal political candidate. My payment corridor for donations is not currently set up. But under MikeFahl.com, if you send me any donation under $50, it can be anonymous, meaning I don't have to provide receipts. And all you have to do is let me know that goes to the campaign. And then once the payment corridor to the current bank account is set up, you'll have access to that. All right. So the problem with the current state, the virtue of the amendment, primary amendment, in my thinking, is removing money as speech, removing money from representation, representatives of any population, state, or constituency. In other words, our representatives have conflated service for enrichment. Representatives of the people accepting personal self-business and or financial gain or money, assets, capital, or promises of material or financial benefit are essentially corrupted. Any votes, yes or no, upon bills before Congress are then understood to be influenced by monies, assets, properties, position, and are corrupted, and henceforth the representative ceases to represent the state of or the constituency to which their position represents. In other words, we no longer allow bribes, aka lobbying money or gifts, to dictate votes, value, or the needs of the people to which the laws are enacted. And since lobbyists of many industries of special interest desire to influence the legal structure of the country to favor their own prosperity above and beyond the needs and the well-being of the representative population, This amendment is meant to bring well-intended statespeople to Congress as representatives who read the bills. They must actually read all the bills that they vote on, to which they are voting upon. America loves its business and its financial gain, yet our laws are not meant to the behest of any political, individual, financial gain. And since the service of a statesperson is for the people to whom they represent, a series of limitations is to be applied to these service people. No representative of a state population, aka a senator, nor their spouse, nor business entity which they are a manager or a member, nor a representative of a segment population within a state, aka a member of the House of Representatives, their spouse, nor their business entity, which they are a manager or a member, once taking office until they no longer hold office, may, Section 1, purchase any investment property, purchase stock, cryptocurrency, any asset, capital asset, or otherwise seeking to advance their financial position. Why? So what I'm saying is this: anybody related to this person within 1 degree, I mean, we're not talking second cousins, right? Any sort of workaround that ingratiates the person voting on the bill in any fashion, financially, any fashion, that family is not allowed to ingratiate themselves financially while they're a representative, or to set themselves up after the fact of not being a representative, or to benefit somebody through some nepotism or some insider trading. This is part of the corruption, and so therefore we get rid of that. Section 2, no corporation, no company, person, lobby, lobbyist, or entity may influence, entice with future promises any member of Congress with money, monies, currency, real or digital assets, or financial gain, or future financial or professional promises. Section 3, nor may any member of Congress invite or accept any enticements, money, or act upon any promises of future financial gain from any company, entity, person, or organization during their duration in office. Nor may any member of Congress make a promise to vote on legislation to return for their post-representative positions within a corporation. That meaning said you're not going to be able to work at a corporation that you once represented. Any corporation, company, Section 4, any corporation, company, person, lobby, lobbyist, or entity sending funds, currency, assets, deeds, or ownership of any asset to a member of Congress is to be charged with a felony. Any sitting member of Congress accepting money, currency, assets of any kind is in violation also of a felony, meaning we make it a felony that anybody that accepts money and attempts to use their political position, it's hollowed. The whole January 6th, the hollowed chambers of our great virtuous nation, which is already corrupted by money, needs a taking out. Now, drain the swamp for me means drain the financial swamp. Unfortunately, Trump, being a businessman and not the virtue of the people, as he took contracts and paid lower than the contract, didn't pay it at all, allowed him to take them to court, bought them out. Different than a vulture capitalist like Mitt Romney or something, buy a corporation off, sell off its assets, sell off everything about it, and just pull off a profit and be done with it. Just vulture capitalism. No, Trump's mobster capitalism. And the whole point is that the U.S., although we have survived for a couple centuries on our industry and our capitalism, and I do believe in the trading of currency. I believe in something like a classical capitalism. But corporate capitalism, crony capitalism, insider trading, government payoffs, lobbies, the movement of money within our hollowed corridors. It's disgusting. This is not representative of the people. This is precisely why merely an artist, merely somebody with political theory, somebody that's written a book on embedded contradiction, dialetheism, an issuance of dissonance into modern philosophy, an introduction to modulate or build rudiments to modules, abstracts, if you will, legal abstracts, if you will, in order to coordinate a better future that also, once again, echoes the historic amendments that we have on the books, while also encouraging a progressive population to get off their asses and actually mobilize and streamline a politic and even voting processes, perhaps in blockchain, such that the people are more organically able to adjust the vertebrae, pull out an amendment if they want, if they so choose, put it back in on the next cycle, the next movement, hold your representatives' feet to the fire and attempt something well, a lot of the judges are part of what is called the Federalist Society, Federalist Society. That they're members of this, and a part of their legal bent is not a representative of the people or of states, it's of federal power, right? And then a lot of them are ideologues, and as you know, they're coming down hard. In one respect, the idea that the foremost ruling on Roe v. Wade, mentioned by one of the sitting Supreme Court justices, was that there was nothing in the Constitution that would support a reason for the Supreme Court or federal law to be legislating it, was a justification to kick it back down to the states. Now, what has been distributed across the land historically, gay marriage, if you will, rights that I think I personally feel are liberal civilian rights, I believe. I would hope, if you will, not that I could know, right? But that I would hope that if they are to cut away all federal law that define like gay marriage, gay law, transsexual behavior in public, or public decency, or something, anything that is within the constitutional purview that a state would like to do, where the federal legal system is not putting them in check, or where they're not at the behest of the federal legal system, I would then hope, for greater use of a state to transfer goods through. Meaning, I would hate, not that I'm homosexual, I would hate for homosexual couples, let's say, driving through Nebraska, to not only have it be illegal, but be a felony to be married in their state, have no right to traverse, let's say, from, the bottom of Indiana to middle Utah or something, right? And they're not allowed to travel through that state because they could be arrested for some other state's law. I mean, there should still, if we're a nation, have some form of federal unity. And although I'm a minarchist and believe in a reduction of federal powers, I'm not an anarchist, and I believe that there is something like social, civil, communal form. Like, people aren't shitting on the streets, walking around on all fours naked. We generally dress. We don't walk backwards. We don't allow people to shit in the streets, generally, right? And that we are constituted on some form of what we call a civil justice system. Now, as far as the justice system, and one amendment that we could go without, ding, Amendment 13. Our 13th Amendment allows somebody to be basically put into a labor or a slaved labor position, provided they are found guilty in a court of law and they're incarcerated. Now, if one wants to note relationships to stratas of Black peoples having been discriminated against, the idea of quick search and seizures, quicker arrests, and incarceration could alleviate, meaning this kind of amendment allows another form of slavery to a system which, even if someone is found guilty, it doesn't mean that that is a correct judgment. It just means that's the judgment of the court. So, and then the idea, especially under current spending, that our tax dollars are hard at work. Well, Biden just brought in the IRS to suck more money out of our system, out of the people, and throw more money at the IRS in order to do so. But at the rate of spending, there's no gross domestic product for generations that are going to make up for what's happened. In any case, my point was, as far as the strata of bigotry, a closer look, let's say, at the 13th Amendment, where no, if you're incarcerated, you're not required to work. You don't have to shovel shit, change asbestos, or build license plates. Fuck that noise, right? You don't have that. So, because that could then once again encourage a new type of slavery for the criminal. Another thing is prosecutorial advantage. The idea of multiple charges for the same crime, the idea of plea deals at the prosecution's ability to maximize a certain punishment of one charge if the person is willing to take a plea of an admission of guilt on a secondary charge. This pressure game is, well, quite frankly, it's horseshit, and it's not good justice. And I would want to remove an idea that the court system has to favor the initial charges of the prosecution without analyzing an overview of the case at first. No, instead they've offloaded it to whether the prosecution of the state wants to prosecute an individual, which is of itself a type of cherry-picked thing. I don't believe, for example, Nancy Pelosi's husband is properly going to be arraigned for drunk driving. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I have that story wrong. My point, though, is we get rid of what's called prosecutorial advantage in the court system. We really, really examine the idea of the power of the plea deal, and we limit the power of the prosecution in the state to utilize plea deals as pressure reasons to not take a client to court on the merits of the charge, right? It puts a bigger threat of weight of one's consideration about their life and what's being posed against them. That is oftentimes, well, I'll say it's a corrupt behavior. And I don't think it's egalitarian. Now, my views are that every ethno-national group that contributes to the melting pot of the U.S. is a virtue, and should be here. I believe there should be such a thing as a streamlined citizenship, but I believe that people should not be coming over a border. But that being said, while we're continuing with international expansion and the toppling of other governments, while our elite and corporations take these resources and cause conflict and deprivation around the world, maybe the form of relief is to allow people to come in. Like, hey, you guys fucked us over with your money and your government and your CIA takeovers. We'd like a piece of the action too, right? It's a form almost of legal relief to leave the no wall, but and the idea is like we are a melting pot of cultures and ethnicities. And I don't believe in class segregation and this bring in a lower working class to provide a slave class to maintain those that are at the top of the shit pile to benefit from all the labor of those coming in, which a lot of times that's the benefit of turning the globe into a pyramid where the USA has traditionally been at the top, is that our shit goes downward and then people fly up to labor for us. And that green cards historically allowed other countries to benefit. But then anchor baby laws, those sort of laws allowed a greater migration back into the country. You can underscore all of this of, hey, colonialism brought it in. Mexico used to own it. Therefore, Mexican descendants should be able to take back whatever before the Louisiana Purchase definition of Mexico from, Texas up to Washington State or something to that effect, right? I don't agree that we can go back in time in this, although back to Crimea and the Donbass region, if I was president, I would just say we're not at war with Russia, but we are fully defending Ukraine. And so any troops or anything that is comes into that region, we're going to stomp it out. Why do I say that? Because it's a virtue war. Afghanistan was a tribal country. My understanding, we attempted to install a singular government such that we could dictate their resources and their people. Seemed failed, just like the Russians were prior to us. And we're out to maintain what we think are the best interests of our interests globally, and we're doing so. We though, I don't believe we're really being attacked as a nation on the outside, meaning no one's bombing our country. 9/11 is the closest argument to or Pearl Harbor, right? And something's definitely fishy about 9/11. I can attest to that. And there's other psyops apparently as to why it is the U.S. got into its historic wars. That being said, the attempt is not to bore the viewer of this. The attempt is to encourage you to get behind what I believe is a reanalysis of currently held legal policies and yank those out, retool what there are, either put it back or keep it out, right? But there's parts of the body politic that we really need to work on. And so some of these base layers, these huge abuses that ingratiate our representatives and make them essentially worthless. And the idea of special elite senators and elite House members that they're put into these different pocketed areas. This is an obscenity. The Congress is a Congress so that the representation and those that are voted into office have the will to get access to certain top secret, if you will, information. That has to come to an end. If someone is vetted and voted in, they can be, we can limit their disclosure of the information, but every single representative that has anything to do with passing a policy should have access to all the heavy information that's going on. There is a cloaking of information, obviously. There is a restriction on speech. There is an attempt to make certain that the minds of a civilization do not veer too off course in variance. And so that has been like the Operation Mockingbird and or whatever media apparatus are to keep us focused on the sportsmanship, the left versus the right, the Trump versus the dementia Biden versus illegal Trump now, right? Perfect time for me to get in. I'll use it. Now you can see basic strategy and goodwill and good virtue. I'm better than a peanut farmer, and God bless Jimmy Carter. Seriously. He gave back Panama. He wasn't just there for the reason. He gave that as a resource back to those people. We still control it. We still got access to it. We're not allowing that, but they own it. And he's still goodwill. He still does builds housing for the homeless. He's an incredible philanthropist. Granted, I paint, and that's not to disparage the dipshit dog paintings that George Bush Jr. does. In order to, I guess, come over all of his worldwide destructions and deaths that he's caused. A grand virtue towards less death, less war, less spending money towards, seriously, for the people prior to international causes. Definitely required. Definitely a good thing. The other thing is AI. AI could potentially, on a global level, already be advising people that are advising politicians on best how to rule or coordinate or win some political game if they're able to actually implement everything within what the AI's collected data points would summarize. And so the objective or whatever is considered the ideal or the underlying base value of the AI would be what the yield is of said processes. Vandana Shiva wrote a book that impacted me on. I'm not certain I'm going to get the name right, but basically it's multi-bioculturalism, something to that effect. And it was a book about the power of the variety within all of the different species of plants on an organic level, and the idea that the initial Monsanto GMOs were an attempt to reduce genetic variance within seed strain, within plant strains, for the virtue, I guess, of being, let's say, more insect repellent, anti-parasitical. It then these particular seeds became dominant and were taking over other crops, and essentially I suppose making more of a monoculture within each species at the expense of the organic, historic, um, stewarded attempts at, plant husbandry, I guess you might call it, like a Mendel's notion of breeding a certain sort of length of being with another, right? Something where you allow something practical to happen, but you're not getting within the genetic code of the plant. Anyway, her argument, and the reason I bring this up, is that the idea of a global governance, I'm not saying it could not be actualized where every sector on the Death Star wasn't understood as different. But I believe personally that there should be something, even in the history of nation states, there should be something like the solidification of people in the history of their values, which define what it is, defines their country, defines that said nation state. And the history of the nation states are not that old, but at the same time, it's currently where we are. The idea of running for the president of the United States is not to run for the president of Canada, North America, Middle America, Latin America, South America. That's not the case. It's still a lot of land that should have some sort of intra or internal domestic policy, such as every other border's internal intra domestic policy. One day, perhaps the globe can move to a global system. I currently believe that multiculturalism, multi nations with multiple differences and different solutions of governing that are not just responses to, Chinese totalitarianism or American, liberal democracy. Not merely banana republics either. That countries have a right more so to their own sovereignty. So part of my administration would in fact be to dislocate many military holds and or political holds, even if we did contract to keep a military in there, to remove certain political restrictions that those other countries are in line with. Part of American interest needs to fall back and diminish if we are to limit the dollar. What is the virtue of this? On a globe, buildings grow outside away from each other. Now, if the globe was internal, if you will, right, and you grew buildings big enough, right, inside, they would bump into each other. I say that because essentially what's happening within an economic and world resource grab with this many humans, with this many needs, and this restriction of access and the buying off and the sitting on patents and laws and land and resource and government controls and zonings and everything else that controls the people. We're left with nation states and different nation philosophies attempting to expand their power as well, their influence, their way of being, their how they sustain their being, and they're running eventually as we continue to grow into each other, meaning the international community is not looking, unfortunately, for solutions. the U.S. background agencies appear to be looking to maintain a type of war and then help shovel money and maneuver it around to major international players, so even they are abiding by this shuffleboard bullshit game that the U.S. is doing. We're not trying to take over the whole globe because it doesn't benefit us. There always has to be an adversary. So when I'm referring to multiculturalism, I'm not just referring to the great superpowers. It would be really nice if we actually saw how humans attempted to design their lands where they were utilizing their own resources and they weren't on the behest of international banks or national banks that were at the behest of international banks. So much has to do with money, and so much has to be treated relative to the money. There can't be an immediate jubilee, but setting forth a definite dislocation of the dollar and a dismemberment of the Federal Reserve, and their notion of an elastic economy. It's all orchestrated relative to the needs that the politicians believe we need to throw money at mostly on an international level now. So either you believe in infinite economic spending, some people do. They think it can just continue to happen, but that only exasperates the inflation that people are feeling, where the lowest class feels it. That being said, perhaps I should stop this video. On to the next one. We can talk about homelessness. We can talk specifically about different streamlinings of immigration. We could talk about the idea of nuclear proliferation, the exclusion of Iran and North Korea from other exchanges. If anything, our tech companies could be good at infiltrating. Look, if the U.S. is using it to spy on its own country, then and the other countries are on their own network, and we can only spy on them as much as we can, it might not be a bad idea to attempt, perhaps, to use technology and culture to show the inhabitants within what we believe are abusive countries, perhaps like North Korea, to get a taste of something else, such that they crave it or they find a discontent and dissatisfaction with where they are. Like a cultural media warfare. Okay. Peace, but drama and yogas and working through a rebuilding and a retooling of the system, of the policies that we have. It's important. It's important that we do this, and it's important that you get somebody that's concentrated on things that are not just when they say pro-establishment, they mean that which is already in place and that has been passed off as an ideal, and where it's not. We know it's not. Now we can't just go back to same old country bumpkin way of being, but we could sure start by listening to the people and their feelings on cameras in the streets and on the phones, and money and inflation and immigration, and instead of just allowing our bought out politicians to vote against our best interest at a federal level. And so there is some retooling, and this can be done. we can do this. There is a plan to work the system like a Rubik's Cube, like a Jenga puzzle. Trump showed there are certain plays that can occur politically that don't just have to end in a fracture. He showed some fault lines, and therefore we see that the president has great power, not merely to upset the establishment, but at this rate, unless we pull back, right? Unless we pull back and we take a good look at what we're doing domestically to our own population, and we weigh that against the history of the virtues that our legal system and our current structure is founded on. If we don't maintain the foundation, then the whole thing can be rewritten. I believe there's virtues in the founding fathers, and that the sins of the founding fathers are not they don't overshadow the work and what it is that they put forth. A lot of people have sinned in a lot of stuff, but it doesn't mean that they haven't produced good work, or they don't have good policy, or they don't have a good intent. And then you get the people that are bought out, sold out, have bad intent, ill intent, selfish intent, hedonistic intent, and they don't hold up a virtue to the system. They want to pull it down after they have found a power within it. I still believe in the First Amendment, and people can have their opinions. I would hope that the virtue of the hollowed house of representation was not always filled with bought out sellouts. Buy in, sell in, right? Sell into your country. Don't do otherwise. That being said, let's see what the best way is here for me to there we go. Find my cursor. I'm going to end this now. Please feel free to comment. Once again, campaign to elect Mike Fahl, mutantmanagement.com. I'll have a donation set up. I'm looking for people to help support me in a progressive, non-war reduction of establishment, minarchism, and a retooling of a lot of the divisions. By divisions, I mean bureaucratic and justice, legal, secret, intelligence divisions, at least in auditing, right? And once again, if not a removal, which I believe needs to be done, a removal of the Fed, where the purse goes back to the people. But if not that, then a full-on auditing or a control or a transparency. And where exactly are all monies that we're sending around globally going? They shouldn't end up in prime ministers' wives, sisters of wheelbarrows by the millions of USD being trafficked from Ukraine to Poland, or what sort of nonsense this is. There's problems still, obviously, and so that's why I vote for me, folks. Mike Fahl, Fahl.